Hi, my name is Joanne Fisher, and I am a certified body talk practitioner and infant sleep educator. I focus on family practice, and particularly prenatal and birth. So today's video, we're going to talk about the experience of the fetus and how body talk can help with fetal development, but mostly around programming, how we see the world and our imprinting of our own self-esteem and our own self-worth. So we're going to explore topics such as adoption and surrogacy and maternal stress and how the brain in the baby is wired through those earliest experiences in utero. So we're going to begin this journey by talking about active memories. So active memories in body talk is our experiences that stay active and charged and triggered with us. So whenever we get upset or triggered by anything, it's an old experience coming back to tell us that we need to address it, that it's time for us to change something. So if we, have road rage or we just get reactive to somebody's comment, it's always coming back from an early experience. And so with body talk, when I work with young children and even in utero, that we can start to address any of these situations that are been programmed for us that aren't the best. So when we talk about experiences in utero, any of our maternal stress issues. So any of the beliefs. So when I work with in utero babies, it's really amazing to get into their little psyche and see what belief systems and fears and things are already in place for that child. One that sticks out most in my mind was working with a woman who was from Saudi Arabia, and she was about 20 weeks pregnant, and that she was having a girl. And there was all this stuff coming up around her concerns around being a female and having to go back and be a woman in a female in that culture, because her mom was just a student here and was going to be returning home. So it's really amazing to see what's going on in their little heads. Another thing that comes up a lot is, their fears around upsetting their siblings and upsetting their lives, or it's really amazing what's going on in their little heads all the time. And so one of the things that comes up mostly with this is that children are narcissistic, that anytime anything is coming up, it's always from their viewpoint that this is all about me. That neurologically, children aren't capable of seeing another person's view until they're 6 years old. They did this experiment that I'd seen where they took a ball. One side was red, one side was green. And you show the kid, it's red on one side, green on one side, and put down in front of them. It's like, okay, what color do you see? And the kid says, I see red. Okay, what color do I see? And they'll say red. That they can't actually know that you're seeing something different, that they're just completely incapable of seeing another person's perspective until they're about 6 years old. And so when we are working with our children and or we're just having life and our child wants our attention and we're on the phone or we're busy doing something and I'm too busy, you're going to have to wait. And we do that all the time. That's going to imprint them with this message that they don't understand, that it's about what you're doing, that it's all about them. I'm not good enough. I'm not worth your time is what gets imprinted in those situations. And so we see those own stories. And particularly my story was when we have unplanned pregnancies and that early experiences, if you're not certain you're going to have that baby, that sets them up right away for feeling like maybe they're not valid or they're not worth anything. So I'm a lot younger than my siblings. My siblings are 7 and 5 years older than me, and they were done having kids. And so I've just always had that felt sense of, I was an oops, I was an accident. I never should have existed in life. That was never really wanted, that I was always in the way, that I was an inconvenience. It was basically how I was programmed. And so with that, I didn't even recognize the mild to moderate depression I had until I was using body talk and using our little muscle test to fill out a form at a naturopathic clinic. And it had me mark yes for depression. I'm like, interesting. And it wasn't long after that I was ready to address that. And it took us into those fetal life experiences of my experience. It was actually specifically my dad when he was told that by my mom that she was pregnant with me. And my mom, there was also some stuff coming up around my mom not recognizing she was pregnant with me until, a fair ways in. But that his initial reaction was he didn't want me, and how that kind of set me up for all that stuff. But the good news is through body talk, it took me 30 something years before that came up to be addressed and even a few years of working with body talk before I was ready to address that. But I didn't even realize how much depression I had until you're out of it. You don't realize you're in a fog until the fog lifts. And so it's just really cool that we're able to go back and heal those things. And I have another video about healing, physical injuries that I had that stem from experiences when I was a child. And how when we overcome those and everything that we have going on in our life is our body trying to give us a symptom, a clue that something needs to be addressed. And so with that, we can really look at that. So when we have an unplanned pregnancy, it's really creating these stories already that, I'm not wanted, that I'm not worth anything, even when they are, and then you decide you have them, that it's already that imprinting of those initial experiences can be a profound impact around their own self-esteem and their self-worth. And so when I work with clients that are adopted, work with children, work with adults that have been adopted, I haven't had the experience of working with any women that are giving their child up for adoption or anyone that's adopting babies. If you're adopting babies from overseas or anywhere else and you know who they are and where they're coming from, I can actually tap in and work with them remotely, no matter where they are in the world. I have clients all over the world. So I'd be really interested to work with children in that situation. But the one thing I've noticed with people that I work with adopted is they all carry that core wound of I'm not good enough, that I'm not worth your time, that core wound of abandonment that really leads people into feeling like they need to be a perfectionist. There's a real high correlation that I found of disordered eating patterns and body image distortions and just all these different things where they need to feel like they have to be perfect or I'm going to be rejected. This whole sense of being rejected. So yeah, I've found issues with eating disorders in a number of cases I've worked with as adults and teens that are adopted, more so in women. I haven't had the opportunity to work with too many men that were adopted, but yeah, so really, really key core wounds there that set us up for a lot of problems down the road if we don't address them. So if you have a child that's adopted, definitely getting some work in to address that, or if you are going to be adopting a child, we can work with that in the earlier stages. Or if you are not going to keep a baby and you're going to be giving it up for adoption, that we can help this baby out the most during that stage. I did have the pleasure of working with one surrogacy. Lovely experience that just warms my heart of a woman giving up her body to provide a child for two men on the other side of the world. And through that experience, I was really intrigued to see what was going to come up in the psyche of that little baby, because, I've been created and I'm wanted, but I'm not here. And so it was actually after I worked with the baby, and the baby came quite early, but was still healthy and not really needing any interventions, despite being a fair bit early. I wasn't actually surprised when I thought about it, because a lot of what came up with that baby was the issues of the disconnect from the woman carrying the child, and the loneliness, and how hard it was to not have that connection, and how hard it was for the surrogate woman as well to keep that distance from the child. So I think the only way that surrogacy could be less impactful is the situations of other people I know where they've had their, good friend or someone really close to them carry the baby for them, and that can love them, be connected with them, and still have that connection in the life, that would have the least impact for that baby. But again, we can work through a lot of that stuff and resolve it, get rid of those patterns and beliefs. The one thing that came up with that surrogate child was they felt like they were kind of a freak of nature, that they still shouldn't have existed. being a test tube baby and all. So that was quite interesting in its own self. And so it'll be interesting to see. I don't think I'll ever have the opportunity to work with that child again because they're off on the other side of the world. But yeah, where this comes to be as I work with more and more babies and situations. Another thing I just wanted to talk about was fetal life and the development of it. So we know the physical development that happens through, the different weeks of pregnancy. One of the things we like to look at from the body talk perspective is the development of the brain through the triune brain, the reptilian, the limbic, and the cortical regions of the brain. And how we look at the first trimester is when we're programming that reptilian brain, all those autonomic fight, flight, stress, fear responses. And so when that first trimester, those first early weeks, if we're, not certain we're going to keep the baby, if we're not really happy about the pregnancy, that's going to already program that child to want to be in that survival mode and that stress mode as well. So when we get into the second trimester, any experiences, any traumas that go on can affect the limbic system, which is our area that's mostly known around emotional processing and around where we start to create storage of memories and storages of experiences. And so as much as they say, a child's not going to remember those first experiences, they do. It's cellular memory versus, a cognitive memory. But any pain, any birth trauma, all that stuff does stick with you, even if you don't have that conscious recollection of it. And then, of course, the third trimester, we're working with the cortex, that more logical regions of the brain, which then are not fully developed until you're into your late 20s, mid to late 20s. So we always look at that processing of setting that foundation and the neuroplasticity of the brain. So as an infant sleep educator, we have studying a lot of knowledge around the development of the brain. And when we're in stress responses, that it can actually start to prune off areas of the brain and the connections that they would want to create. When you're supposed to be creating good connections, stress will actually start to decrease those connections. And so the one thing that we're finding, and the science is pretty clear on, is if you can keep the baby out of stress, if you can mimic that in-utero experience for at least that fourth trimester, that first 3 months of age, if you can have baby wear, skin to skin, that nurturing, mimicking that womb environment for 3 months, if not 9 months, then they're going to be the best off. And you can even inhibit expressions of epigenetics and set this brain foundation up for the best it's going to be. In the first 3 years of life, which is infancy, as an infant sleep educator, we actually work with right up to 3 years age. You're developing 85% of your brain growth, and then only that last bit, as throughout the remaining ages. So all that main brain growth is happening in that first 3 years of life. And so those early experiences set us up and program us for the rest of our lives. And so if we can work right from preconception and throughout pregnancy, we can get that set up the best way possible for you and for baby. And we know how the maternal stress affects both mother and child. So that is my passion, working with in-utero babies, working through pregnancy, working through birth, making sure we can have the best and greatest birth experiences possible. So, thank you.